Excellent. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Kelly Santarosa. I'm a Senior Policy Analyst with Alberta Municipalities, and I'm here with my colleague. You want to introduce yourself?
Thank you. My name is Warren Noga, and I'm a Policy Advisor with RMA.
And we're really happy to have this webinar opportunity for both RMA and Alberta Municipalities members. Before we get started, I just want to make sure everyone understands how we're going to work with the webinar and how you can participate. So you should all have the ability to mute and unmute yourselves, as well as use the chat and the Q&A box. But I'll just ask that everyone stays muted throughout the presentation, and we'll take questions at the end. So you can use the chat throughout the session to post comments, chat with other people. If you have questions as you think of them, you can put them in the chat. And then at the end of the session, we'll kind of go through and answer those questions. Just make sure that when you're posting to the chat that you pick all panelists and attendees from the drop-down list so everyone can see your comments. And then after the presentation, you can, again, either use the chat or you can raise your hand and we'll call on you and you can unmute yourself and then ask your question. And don't forget to let us know who you are and which municipality you represent. And then the last thing is we are recording the webinar and we'll be sending out a link through the AB Munis and RMA newsletters. So if you know someone that wanted to attend and couldn't make it, we will have a recording made available. So Warren, I'll pass it over to you now to introduce our speakers.
Perfect. Thank you, Kelly. So as Kelly mentioned, RMA, RMA and AB Munis are happy to be co-hosting today's webinar with the RCMP, speaking about their new community safety and wellbeing branch. This branch works to proactively reduce crime and victimization by addressing the contributing root causes in communities served by the RCMP. We know that policing costs can be a challenge for many municipalities, so we're pleased to see the RCMP investing in prevention. Joining us today from the RCMP are Deputy Commissioner Curtis Zablocki, Chief Superintendent Peter Tufik, and Nina Sahasrabudi, Executive Director of Strategy, Business and Innovation. Thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Warren and Kelly. Thank you both for facilitating the session with us here today. It's great to have the opportunity to speak with everybody across the province today on this, I'll say, at least somewhat soggy day here, at least in the Edmonton area. I think it might be like that in many areas across the province as well. But it is good to be here today and to be able to introduce our community safety and wellbeing branch. One of our main functions as a policing organization here in Alberta, and really since I began leading the Alberta RCMP in 2018, our organization has been continuously evaluating the policing services that we provide, and that's really important that we look at how we're delivering services, where we're delivering them, and engage with Albertans across the province and getting feedback in that context. And as you know, it's our responsibility as a provincial police service to ensure that we're listening to the citizens and communities that we serve, and that we're meeting the needs of those citizens, helping to build safe and healthy communities. We know the policing needs of Albertans are changing, responding to an ever-changing society with needs that go beyond simple help from a frontline officer. Policing services must continue to evolve with these needs. This new branch places an enhanced and more coordinated approach to community wellness in guiding our work, with a focus on building upon community partnerships, leveraging relationships with social and health agencies, and operating in a data-informed environment, as well as working with community members. We're working collaboratively to reduce crime and increase accessibility to support in communities. While we've been working in these areas, I'll say organically in our operations, the Community Safety and Wellbeing branch creates efficiencies, increases our outreach abilities, and ensures that we're connected with the right partners to best serve Albertans. It's easy to see how important this unit is to the evolution of our service. This past week has illustrated just how vital access to social and health services and coordination with our partner agencies really is. The very tragic homicides of Mr. Trang, Mr. Hung, have sadly shone a spotlight on the lack of resources and systemic gaps in service that we face. especially in our rural communities, challenged with the lack of adequate health and social services. While this unit, I'll say, is no magic bullet, it certainly sets a course for new ways of policing, integrating our services with the health and social services. I'm happy to introduce Chief Superintendent Peter Tufik, who many of you may know. He's our first officer in charge of the Alberta RCMP Community Safety and Wellbeing Branch. Chief Superintendent Tufik is passionate about this work and has worked very closely with many partner agencies and organizations that will be key in the success of this new branch. I'm going to ask him to explain a bit more about the branch, how it works, and some of its key units. I know, Peter, you've got a presentation here this afternoon. If we can bring that up.
Yeah,
I will turn it over to you.
pass the mouse.
Pass the mouse.
So good afternoon, everyone. Looks like Warren, I need you to enable my ability to share the screen. Really appreciate the, yeah, thanks. Really appreciate the opportunity to get to talk to everybody today. Some of you may have heard me speak already about some of the work we have been doing over the last few years. So today I'm really going to invite you to come with me on a bit of a journey. I'm going to take you through a little bit of the work that we have done, talk about some of the links to the new branch. As the commanding officers talked about, I'm going to tie that together with how we're kind of tying that together with the branch and some of the new directions that we're going in to even expand some of the work that we've been doing over the last few years.
And I think, Peter, there'll be an opportunity for some questions.
Yeah.
Do you want to take them at the end?
Yeah, maybe at the end might be better,
okay,
so that I can give people an overview. We can have kind of a common starting point, and then certainly any questions we have at the end, happy to answer, talk about some how we'll implement some of the strategies I'll talk about today.
Perfect.
All right, so community safety and well-being is a branch that we've established, and really it's about trying to think about that new approach, being innovative in some ways with our approach to our service delivery model, thinking about those partnerships, thinking about our outreach with our communities, and then working right across all of our business lines in the province to deliver that service. So today I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction of the branch. I'm going to take you through our data to action program, where we really use data and intelligence to guide our policing operations in the province. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the steps we're taking to help reduce barriers to reporting. And then I'm really going to talk about that transition to community data to action and that sort of future state, where we really want to break down some of those silos, work collaboratively with some partners and stakeholders, and talk really about how the new branch fits into that new model that will have a bigger focus on that partnership with our communities to help us in some of the problem-solving efforts that we have underway. So I think the biggest question for us to start with really is, why a new branch? There are some things that we've learned along the way, right? We know that building partnerships that help break the cycle of crime, victimization, and disorder works. So we look at our regional police and crisis team, where we have police officers partnered with mental health professionals to help deliver mental health services out in the field to people that are actively experiencing crisis, and support some of our frontline members that are working with those same people in crisis, so we can deliver the best services and sometimes maybe even keep them in the community, reduce the disruptions that they have to their life. Our integrated offender management team, which I'm going to talk about a little later today, but where we really are working in partnership with health services, addiction services, income supports, to break that cycle of crime and help stabilize that offender, who's, the offenders we select are the offenders that are creating the most harm in the community, and actually transition them, into being contributing members and reducing the harm that they're creating in our communities. The virtual opioid dependency program. Recently, just at the end of last year, we partnered with Alberta Health Services to deliver to people that we've arrested who are addicted to opioids and about to experience withdrawal because they're coming into our cells, an opportunity really for intervention, some medication that actually reduces their chance of overdose and also reduces the symptoms that they have of withdrawal, to help stabilize them, and then actually transitions into ongoing care should they choose to do that. We know we have strategies to help us increase our engagement with communities. So, we have a community engagement and outreach team where we're working with repeat victims of crime, property crime in particular, helping them, address some of the things that maybe are leading to them repeatedly being victimized, offering some real-time support, as well as providing information to our communities about some of the work that we're doing and information around how to protect yourself from crime. Our diverse community engagement, where we're dealing with our diverse populations, talking about things that are impacting those communities, pressures that they're having, and how police can help engage in those problems and maybe help solve them. I'll talk a little later about some of the gaps we have in our information reporting, particularly in some of those communities. Our community engagement tracker, one of the priorities for the commanding officer is to ensure that all of our detachments and our detachment commanders are engaging in our communities, getting a good understanding of what the crime problems are. And we put in some reporting mechanisms so that we can actually track that and ensure that that work is being done. Our PROS data center and our callback unit, they're intended to take some of that burden off of our frontline response officers, giving them more time for proactive work, that engagement work, allowing them time to really engage with our communities. And lastly, we know that our problem-oriented policing strategies are making a difference in crime. So, I'm going to talk today about data to action. I'll take you through a little bit of what that is. We've worked with, our law enforcement partners, our sheriffs, conservation, community peace officers on multi-agency hotspot patrols. I'll talk a little bit about hotspot patrols as well. And then, our Project Lockup, where we're actually focused on those people that are repeat victims of property crime and working with the people at that greatest risk to help reduce that risk for them. So at the end of the day, we know the value in continuing to improve our existing partnerships and expand our network to build new ones. We've heard what Albertans are saying about engaging more with our communities, and we're committed to collaborative and evidence-based approaches that reduce harm and really improve community outcomes. So, you're going to hear me talk about this a lot, and I think really it's a big focus of the branch is that collective impact. From that multidisciplinary standpoint, different expertise, inside and outside policing, how do we work together to really start to change the landscape? What information can we share outside of those silos that traditionally exist so that we can really start identifying what are those common high-risk problems and how do we start to work together collaboratively to address those? That'll be a real theme of today. So, really the branch itself is split into two components. There's a public safety component and a community well-being component. I think the infinity is a really good way to depict it because there is a relationship between those two things. At the center really is that data, analytics, and intelligence that we use to drive our operations. And in fact, when I've been working with other partners, my challenge to them is what information can they contribute to that picture to help broaden the view that we have on the problem? Because as I'll talk about in a little bit, there is a limitation to police reported data. We only have roughly a third of reported crime comes into police. So, the more we can expand that with information from other agencies and other areas, the broader our view will be in that. And then really around it, you see we have engagement, outreach, and crime reduction. And if I can, I'll just start to fill in the units that fill in there. So you can see a number of units that we have in the RCMP and some new units that we've built start to align under community safety and well-being, engaged in those different areas of crime reduction, outreach, engagement, and as I said, at the core of that, analytics and intelligence. So, really, this is about integrating that education, prevention, intervention, and enforcement. I think a lot of times people think about policing just from that enforcement standpoint. And, one of the things we've been very mindful of in all the programs we've been building is trying to think about it holistically. And even as we talk about those external partnerships we want to leverage, it's about bringing all of those people to the table so that collectively we can start working at this problem from more than just that enforcement standpoint. At the end of the day, the enforcement actions alone aren't going to solve the problems that underlie it. And I'll get into that in a little more detail when we start talking about some of the social issues and health issues that contribute to why people are committing crime. We need to really tackle this from a broader lens if it's going to be a sustainable and long-term approach. So as I take you through the presentation today, I really want you to be thinking about how do you fit. You're key partners for the RCMP in the province. So, as I kind of take you through the different elements that we have, I want you to think about how you see your communities fitting into this model. How do we improve that communication with vulnerable communities or vulnerable groups? And how do we improve our transparency? Those are things I'm hoping you can keep in mind as we go through today. So I'm going to start by talking about our data to action program. I think it really highlights that shift from reactive to proactive policing. And I just realized that I probably forgot to share the audio. So give me 1 second. I'm just going to stop sharing for 1 second. Share sound. There we go. So I'm going to talk about data to action. I have a little video that will kind of explain data to action in a nutshell. And really it's about taking that data and intelligence, operationalizing that data and intelligence so that we can, improve public safety. And again, I'm going to take you through, these are the existing things. I'm going to talk about how they fit into the new model at the end of the day.
Data to Action is an Alberta RCMP crime reduction strategy initiative that turns data and intelligence into actionable tasks focused on the 4 pillars of policing: targeted prevention, apprehension, suppression, and offender management. The framework is designed to bring RCMP resources and supports alongside external partners across the province to tackle crime. First, communities within Alberta RCMP jurisdiction are ranked by their crime rates. Data to Action then builds its intelligence by looking at where crime is being committed, what type of crime is impacting an area, and who is responsible for the most crime. Next, Data to Action works to gather an idea of a community's larger crime landscape from the people who know it best: the local detachment commander and their frontline officers, community members, and business owners. At Data to Action meetings, local and regional partners, along with the detachment commander and district officer, come together to hear first-hand reports of issues within the community, review intelligence, and discuss recommendations made by crime analysts. This information is used to coordinate resources and strategize operational approaches that respond to the specific needs of a community. Take a community that is suffering from high auto theft rates. Apprehension. Police-monitored bait vehicles might be deployed from the Alberta RCMP Auto Theft Unit to help apprehend offenders in the community using special tracking equipment. The placement of these vehicles would be decided based on recommendations made by intelligence analysts and frontline officers. Suppression. Alberta RCMP crime reduction teams and frontline officers may routinely conduct patrols in areas known to have high auto theft rates. Volunteer community groups are notified and on the lookout for activity in these areas. Targeted prevention. Intelligence analysts may uncover the fact that many auto thefts in the area involve unlocked vehicles. A community outreach campaign could be launched on social media to inform the public of this problem and to provide tips on how to prevent crimes of opportunity. Community groups may even choose to host their own awareness initiatives or events. Offender management. The Alberta RCMP Integrated Offender Management Program would also work with priority offenders in the community. The program helps to address the root causes of criminal behavior by leveraging expertise and support from social services, health agencies, and the justice system. Data to Action identifies crime trends in our communities, bringing focus to crime problems and finding solutions to those issues by building relationships with community partners and working together to reduce crime. Data to Action. Operations led by intelligence to create a safer Alberta.
All right, so doesn't want to let me advance. times.
Advertisement.
Yes. So really, dated action up to this point, and I'll talk a little later in the presentation about where we want to get to in terms of expanding it. Right now is very much enforcement focused, and we have enforcement partners at the table, which I'll talk about on the next slide. But it's really looking through our police data, looking at the broad crime trends of what's happening, where it's happening, when it's happening. Then our criminal analysts are deep diving that information and really starting to look into the linkages of who's involved, why are they committing these crime types, how are they actually going about doing it. If we identify gaps, we have our intelligence coordinators that actually work to help us maybe better understand some of the things that are occurring that are contributing to the crime. And then all of that data really feeds, where are our hotspots for crime? Who are the priority offenders that we need to identify? We have great relationships with our citizen-led group, so we coordinate with them and some of our law enforcement partners. And then lastly, that public engagement and what information can we get out to the public. And just as an aside, half the vehicles in Alberta that are stolen have the keys in them, and half of those are running. So that was a very apt example in the slide to say, if we can start targeting that information in the community, getting that information out, it really helps in that crime reduction effort. So again, just kind of going through the law enforcement partners we have around the table, we've got our Canada Post investigators, they have an investigative body, Corrections Canada, some of our federal policing partners, Justice Solicitor General for the provinces at the table, Secure Communities and Neighborhoods run by the sheriffs is there, Corrections and Probation, Criminal Intelligence Service Alberta, as well as Alert. So that we can start to really look at it from that multidisciplinary lens, what tools are available, either from us as the RCMP or from some of our partners to help us combat these crimes, and where are we starting to see those common problems and overlaps. The way it works basically is, every single month, that crime trend data is, we select a detachment that's, one of our crime impacted communities in a district, and we'll work with that community until we start to see the problem change, or we're satisfied that the processes, partnerships, and so on are well enough established that we can move on to another problem. But then basically every single month in that detachment, we pull all the data, look at the crime trends, look at what's going on. The criminal analysts deep dive that data, any new information that might be coming in. They brief with the district operations officer and the detachment commander over, recommendations that they might have for how they might, best tackle some of those crime issues. They then have the meetings at the district with the detachments, talking about, what tasks need to be created, who's going to be responsible for them, when are they going to get done by. They follow up on that from an accountability standpoint. And then if there's challenges that they have, because they either can't get people to the table or there's some issue with one of the resources, I run a data to action at headquarters where I bring in all the districts, and every month we talk about what those challenges are and how we might overcome them. And around the table, we really have some of the senior leadership from around the province. So, really, if there's a problem identified, we have the right people at the table to help solve that and move it forward from that law enforcement perspective. So where we've been so far, so these are some of the communities that we've had data to action in. It's important to remember that when we leave a detachment area for data to action, our expectation is that that detachment is going to continue running it. We provide intelligence products, not to the same depth that we do with the criminal analyst reports, but there is a series of reports we provide to every single detachment, and the expectation is they will continue that problem-oriented policing approach. They will continue collaborating with their partners in the same way and using the methodology that we use in data to action. And recently, we've started following up with some of the legacy detachments that we've had, checking back in with them to see how they're making out, any new challenges that they might have, as a way to kind of hold that accountable so that, as we continue to expand and grow the program, we know that what we're leaving behind is a legacy really focused on that problem-oriented policing. So I'll give you a couple of examples of data in action to kind of show how this works. I'm going to start a little bit with the integrated offender management program. So it's really this program is really focused at getting those root causes of criminal behavior, understanding what's driving the person to commit the offenses, understanding some of those issues that are maybe underlying addictions, mental health, housing insecurity, often all of those things that lead them into a life of crime, and then partnering with different agencies to help resolve those issues and then stabilize a person. I do think it's important to note, there's a study done here in Alberta, and this is consistent with a similar program run out of BC and a program that this was modeled on out of the UK, where we've seen a 36% reduction in recidivism with the offenders that choose to work with us in this program. And I should note that selecting offenders that are creating the greatest harm. So these are the people that are in the highest risk category for creating harm that we are selecting to try and work with. And that's a big reduction in crime with those offenders. But rather than tell you a little bit about it, I do have a bit of a video to share, and I'll let this offender tell his own story, and then it's supported by some people from different government agencies, as well as our commanding officer stars in this show as well, talking about the importance of offender management.
For 10 years, I didn't think I had a drug problem. I was convinced I didn't have a drug problem. I was convinced I had a money problem, and if I could just have enough money to support my addiction, I'd be fine. My roommate was shot by my other roommate. Shot in the face in my kitchen. That was, I definitely started a spiral downhill from there. I ended up in the hospital, numerous friends dead. My roommate was shot and murdered. And that was kind of, enough was enough, and I had to make some changes.
I think it's well known, research has shown that a very small number of offenders commit a disproportionate number of crimes. Approximately 15% of the offender population commit over 60% of the crimes that police respond to right across this province, right across this country. So in 2009, the Priority Prolific Offender Program started in the province of Alberta. The intent was to create bail packages that would better inform the court and the prosecution service about the offender, so that appropriate conditions could be considered to deal with that particular individual circumstance.
We've learned from past experiences in relation to the PPOP program that we really need a strong focus on prevention and intervention, along with the enforcement aspect that is also so very important with this initiative.
And so what that has sort of spawned is a new evolution of offender management, which is a more integrated approach, integrating community agencies, health agencies, as well as police agencies and corrections agencies to work together with the offenders in the community to assist them, to prevent them from recidivating, to prevent them from recommitting those crimes or getting any types of breaches, going back to jail.
When you talk to a young officer about what is offender management, usually they'll say, let's breach them. It's breaches of recogs, it's doing directed patrols, it's doing door knocks. And my argument is that is part of it, but that is suppression, that's not offender management. We're suppressing their crime in the community, which is something we have to do. But to actually truly get offender management, we have to not only do the suppression, but we also have to work with our community agencies to try and address the root cause of someone's criminal behavior. Or we have to, on the flip side, try and get them longer periods of incarceration.
One of the biggest complaints was that just doing a strict bail package for an individual was not helpful, again, if they had nowhere to live, if they had mental health and addiction issues, and there was no one to follow up with them.
It's important that we address any of the gaps, as I mentioned earlier, in services that are provided to the offenders, but it's also important in the context of being able to share information and intelligence between agencies, more specifically between policing agencies. We need to ensure that there's a consistent approach to the application of the program, and that's where the sharing of information becomes so important. And we need to ensure that none of the offenders, none of the prolific offenders are falling through the cracks when it comes to intervention, prevention, and enforcement.
Realistically, people who are at risk create risk. When you look at some of the lifestyle choices or the life situations or the socioeconomic factors of the reasons that these people are in this position to begin with, they are some of the more at-risk people in our population. and realistically the ones that need the most help. They're creating the most harm to our communities.
But it was just, a cumulative error led to a big problem at the end. I was between that and financial hardship and loss of family and just loss of my supports in general. I just spiraled downhill.
Realistically, if we stick by our old standby of enforcement, we're not going to make any progress with our offenders or with reducing recidivism for a lot of people. So educating our partners, educating police, getting everybody to work together in a collaborative manner to be able to help reduce recidivism in these offenders.
Yeah, I'm coming up on 9 months clean of everything. I haven't touched anything in 9 months. And that's the longest I've had clean since I was probably 13. I'm almost 34. Yeah, I can look people in the eyes. I don't have to make up a story. I don't have to lie or steal or anything. I'm employable. I have a job. I have a girlfriend. I have a place to live that's paid for. Not paid for, but our rent's paid. Our mortgage is paid. Our bills are paid. We have some money in our pockets. I'm not dependent on a substance to control my life and control my actions and my decisions.
I think one of the biggest goals specific to policing is to have these offenders offend less, to commit less crime, and to break that cycle of offending and incarceration.
I think we are on the right track, and we're showing some very early but promising signs of success. As much as 36% decrease in recidivism rates. So if you take those measures, I think pretty remarkable successes, the program has to grow. And it will grow as a consequence of people recognizing that we're having meaningful and long-lasting impacts on people's lives.
One of the best things that's ever happened to me was being part of that program. I mean, these people would drive an hour and a half to my house, to my acreage, and just come check on me and my girlfriend. And nobody would do that. My mom wouldn't even do that. My sister wouldn't do that. But these RCMP officers and police officers and other members of law enforcement would make the trip just to come bring us diapers and just to come say hi and see how we're doing, see if there's anything we needed. And that's what I needed. The alternatives are you quit or you die, or spend the rest of your life in prison. You're not going to be a successful criminal. Those two words don't go together. Yeah, no, without a doubt, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me.
So pretty powerful, just talking about the impact of that program, and literally that story, we have similar powerful stories right across this province in a number of different communities that we're working in. We continue to work to expand that program. Next, I'll talk a little bit about suppression. I'll talk a little bit about patrols and some of our targeted patrols and some of the impacts I think they have. But I do think, I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, one of the tools that we have that helps our officers have some time and take some of that administrative burden off is our callback unit, our PROS data center. I think a few months ago, our PROS data center actually crossed over having done 1 million tasks for members on the road. It helps keep them on the road and active. Our callback unit does quite a lot of work. We provide support to those high-risk detachments, high workload detachments, to take the workload of some of those lower priority calls for service, where maybe there's no evidence to gather, and actually make sure that those people are engaged with the police, getting a call back, having their file reviewed and investigated. If in fact there is some follow-up to do, they can actually send that through to the detachment to complete that work. But again, it takes that workload off the frontline members and gives them the time to do that proactive work and that engagement that we're asking for them to do. When I talk about hotspots, I just think it's important to define what that is. So hotspots are high activity like crime places. So they're not entire neighborhoods, they're not entire communities. It's really looking at where are we seeing those trends in crime, what are those specific locations? And then, it's really about layering in that understanding from the local level that the officers have about what's happening in that landscape and really identifying where those problems are. So, you take we take all of our data and information, it's contextualized by what the local officers know about the area. And then it's about making sure that our patrols are going out there and that we're well positioned to get that to disrupt the crime that might be happening in that area. So a good example of like that effect. So some of you have heard of Project Lockup. Project Lockup is really focused on those properties. It's residences or businesses that are broken into repeatedly. Basically, gold properties means there's been 5 or more break and enters in the last 18 months. Silver properties are 3 to 4, and bronze properties are 2. And our focus really has been on our gold properties. We have a number of layers of things that we do for those properties that include like direct engagement and property assessments, and we have some property marking tools that we give as well. But one of the layers is directed patrols. And we actually have a commitment from our law enforcement partners. So that's the sheriffs, conservation, some of our community peace officers. We share some of this information with them to do patrols in that area where these places are located. Again, to add that disruptive effect. And we've seen some pretty dramatic changes in some of those gold properties in particular over that period of time where that focus has been, because those are the people that are being most victimized. So that's down 44%, those properties. And actually, when we talk to the properties owners, they attribute a lot of the reason why they aren't being re-victimized to the work that we're doing with them. It's all of it. Obviously, they don't always see the patrol work that we do. Obviously, they're not breaking in when people are there. They're breaking in when people aren't there. So, but they do catch us on their surveillance video from time to time, which is good. We like to see that. Education and prevention, that's another key area for us. It's about, this is where we really start to drive that engagement, some of that partnership with our citizen-led groups that I talked about. So that's, Crime Stoppers, Rural Crime Watch, Citizens on Patrol, and now our Alberta Crime Prevention Association. So this includes community sessions that we do, talking about crime issues in an area, getting feedback from people about, what makes them feel unsafe, what are the things they're perceiving as their public safety issues, providing information about the work we're doing in that area and some of what we're doing, awareness events. So the one on the right is a joint venture between Citizens on Patrol and the RCMP, and some of you may be familiar with the Lock It or Lose It campaign, which is really about encouraging people to get their valuables out of their car, we provide tickets that kind of talk about what we've seen and the risks that are there, and again, I'll just kind of reiterate that half the cars that are stolen have the keys in them. Also, please follow us on Facebook or Instagram. We do provide lots of information through those 2 social media platforms. And on our YouTube channel, we actually have a crime academy that we created. So when everything went virtual, one of the things we did when we did our presentation for the Alberta Crime Prevention Association is we actually captured that the video presentations that we did and started our Crime Academy. So I encourage you to go to our Crime Academy, take a look at the videos that we have. We'll continue to upload videos to that. It's really about giving people knowledge and information around how they can prevent crime. I spoke to this because I keep talking about the importance of data and information. So, and I also alluded to the fact that, roughly only a third of crime is reported to police. So really one of the things we wanted to tackle was trying to reduce barriers to reporting. And it's something we'll continue to work on. So the victimization report, which is done by StatsCan pretty regularly, and this is right across Canada, that there's only roughly a third of crime that gets reported to police. That's been pretty consistent. You can see that's been a number that's been fairly consistent over, I'm going to say, the last 15 to 20 years. There are some exceptions. So sexual assault, I believe there's only about a 10% reporting rate on, and you can see hate crimes, was at 22% in terms of reporting. So we really only have a narrow view of crime picture for an area. And all of you, I'm sure, have had people share, I'm not going to phone the police. But as we start to look at our information and we start to analyze where do we deploy our resources, where do we put our patrols, it's really based on that call information. And we put in place systems like our callback unit or PDC to help us absorb that call volume without impacting our front line. And it's really what we use to help us analyze where we're having crime problems in an area. But we need to continue to try and break that down. So we created an app available on Google Play and on your iOS store for download. It's the Alberta RCMP app. And, in the app, we have our online crime reporting. We have where our detachments are located, crime statistics for our province and for each of the communities that we service. Our crime map link is there, a link to Project Lockup that talks about where we're seeing trends in break and enter. We have news sources on that, as well as links to, oh, sorry, I went a little too fast. Apologies, back up. As well as links to some of our law enforcement partners and some of our citizen-led groups across the province, as well as our social media channels. For our online crime reporting, the only limitation is obviously not for crimes in progress or emergencies. For that it's 911. But outside of that, this creates a vehicle, and we heard from people. I heard directly from people at lots of town halls across the province that this is something they were looking for as a way to interact with the police. You finding a detachment, we're your local detachment. We have links to our data and innovation page talking about some of the things I'm talking about here today, as well as the crime statistics. That's our Project Lockup map, where I talked about, our repeat break and enters, whether it's residential or commercial properties. Our crime map, which is active right across Alberta, that shows, a trend of what's happening in your local area. And really the intent of the crime map is to provide people with information about what crime's happening around them and what things do they, really need to be aware of, so that they have a reliable source to look at in terms of what crime's happening in their community and around their neighborhood. We also have links to different mental health supports, as well as all the police services in the province and our news. So with all that said, I'm now going to talk about kind of the next step. So, CEO said at the beginning of the presentation, we're really looking to align all of that work under the Community Safety and Wellbeing branch. And continue to develop some of the things that we have, continue to expand on that work and build on it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, the social determinants of health and the role that plays in policing and the impact really that it has on policing. And, I've said this at a number of times, I've talked about it, people are going to wonder, why is a cop talking about health outcomes? But there is a link. So as you start to look, and obviously, depending on what you look at, some of these categories will differ a little bit, but generally speaking, we're talking about economic stability, the physical environment, neighborhood, education, food, the local community and social context, healthcare. And, basically, if those are not in a great state, they lead to poor health outcomes. That's fairly well accepted. But as you start to look at those conditions here on the top, if we think about those same conditions that I was just talking about, and those social determinants of health, those things lead to behaviors. And sometimes they lead to mental and physical health outcomes. And sometimes those behaviors lead to criminal justice system involvement or contact with the police. And it becomes a little bit of a cycle. And so what we start to see is that those things that are contributing to those poor health outcomes actually are also contributing to behaviors that bring people into contact with police or the justice system, either as offenders or as victims. And that becomes a cycle that continues to drive itself. So just to kind of put this in context, and some of you have seen this slide, we looked at our top 100 offenders over an 18-month period in the province. We took 25 from each of our 4 districts, and they represented roughly 4,000 calls for service. They represented roughly almost 15,000 hours worth of work, police work. And they had a combined CSI score of 300,000, which for context, at that time was all of the crime in Airdrie, or all the crime in Wetaskiwin, or roughly all the crime in Leduc. So it's a pretty big impact with 100 offenders that we're talking about, and we're talking about not small crimes, because the crime severity index is calculated based on the weighting of the crimes. More serious, the heavier the weight is, which is why that number is so high. I'm also going to talk a little bit about repeat victims of crime. So 10% of our victims that small portion, represent almost 40% of the crimes that are committed in are impacted by 40%. They represent 40% of the crime impact in Alberta. And going through some of that victim history that we anonymized for a project we were working on, starting to look at how can we better engage with repeat victims of crime and what are the vulnerabilities that are leading them to come into contact with police or be victimized. We saw that sometimes they had extensive police involvement, both as a subject of complaint and as a victim. In this case, this is actually an anonymized history. They were frequently in contact with the local RCMP. They had 11 occurrences in 1 month where they were coming into contact with police. They had over 28 occurrences involving assault and assault with a weapon, as well as family violence. 6 reported sexual assaults, 3 of which occurred in that year, and multiple calls for service involving mental health. So, you can see like lots of vulnerability, lots of crime impact. And really, when we started to look at, okay, the risk factors, both offenders and our victims had some of those same risk factors in common. So, we saw things like housing insecurity, income insecurity, substance abuse, and mental health issues based on our review of the files that were in prose. So really, I want just to put a fine point on that. These are both the crimes that are being committed by those people, as well as the people that are being victimized. Those are outcomes, right, that lead to them either needing emergency care or needing some kind of emergency social assistance, intervention, or enforcement outcomes where people are going to jail. So that's really the downstream effect. And as I start to talk about trying to move upstream, those downstream effects are the outcomes of these kinds of crimes types. And the challenge will be for us to try and start to move upstream and start to intervene in some of these problems. So one example of that kind of intervention that's midstream that I think is really tangible, that I think really kind of highlights it, is the virtual opioid dependency program. So I mentioned we are doing this in partnership with Alberta Health Services. So it's a program they developed to help people in opioid crisis, both to reduce the risk of overdose, as well as help people get out of that addiction cycle. It's a very profoundly addicting drug, very powerful. Even that risk of death doesn't stop people from taking this drug. It's got such a powerful grip. We recognize that addiction is a healthcare issue. And really, as even said in the video, we want to decrease their involvement with the criminal justice system. The people that, are offenders that are addicted to those substances, we want to decrease their involvement. And really Alberta Health Services is looking at that partnership with policing as, system changing work, right? Because what happens is we encounter these people at the time of arrest. We find them, in an addicted state where they know they're going to go into withdrawal in our cells. We have an opportunity to intervene, provide that, help ease that withdrawal, give them some protection against overdose, and really start that process towards recovery and support all through this program. So if I go back to our stream, you can see VODP kind of fits at that midstream where we have that individual, he's got that issue related to addictions, and we can start to intervene maybe at that point and start to provide some support that might keep them out of that cycle. IOMI is another example of that. So you heard that offender talk about that. Obviously, those are multi-pronged problems, often like multiple things happening. But then can we continue to start to look further upstream and start asking ourselves, are there other things that we can do? So, and I know we have one of the partners, I saw Jean Boda on the call here today, but working with the Alberta Crime Prevention Association, the Canadian Municipal Network on crime prevention, as well as Reach Edmonton, and soon, very soon with Taskwin, to start building some of that, community safety building. In fact, we're working in 9 communities across the province, building some capacity to start to create that community impact. And I've got a little bit of a video here from the Waterloo Region Crime Prevention Council. It's about 1.5 minutes, but I don't think I can say it any better than this video. So I'm just going to let it tell the story of, what I mean about some of those upstream impacts.
When we ignore the many factors that shape people's attitudes, choices, and actions, we limit our ability to prevent crime from happening in the first place. a broad understanding of why crime happens brings prevention into focus. People's actions don't happen in isolation. Our environment plays a key role in how we behave. Early life experiences, the health of the community, opportunities for recreation, employment, social norms, as well as income and housing are just some of the factors that are connected to crime. By shifting upstream and getting closer to the source of the problem, we improve many more lives than by just focusing on the individual. Upstream prevention means we create an environment in which all people have a range of opportunities to grow, to learn, to work, to play, to connect, and to love and be loved. By working upstream, we increase the chances that everyone can reach their potential. This, in turn, goes a long way in reducing crime. A lot more upstream prevention leads to better long-term results and decreases the need for reactive measures. Creating an environment in which everyone can reach their potential is possible, and we all have a role to play. So let's make prevention matter. Learn more at www.preventingcrime.ca.
So as we move towards that next step in data to action, that community component of data to action that we want to move to, it's really about starting to create that holistic approach to community safety through collaboration. These are not quick fixes. There'll be some intervention, some of that midstream stuff we'll be able to accomplish, but some of that upstream stuff, those bigger systemic issues, some of those gaps, but it will be a longer term challenge for us to try and get to. But it's about getting everybody together and starting to talk about those issues and collaborating. It's about integrating, community and government partners working together. So all of us working together to solve these problems, maximizing the operational effectiveness. Instead of working in silos, let's break those silos down and start working on some of the problems collaboratively. Improving community outcomes and reducing crime and victimization in our community really is the end goal. For community safety and well-being branch, we're looking to engage more effectively with our communities and the people we serve. So we want to create tools and mechanisms to do that. We want to improve our partnerships and expand and build our network and build some new partnerships. And we want to develop collaborative and evidence-based approaches that reduce harm and improve community outcomes at the end of the day. That is the presentation. So I guess I'm open for any questions.
Do we have something in the chat?
Oh, I don't know.
I think there was one in the chat just asking if we could share a copy of the presentation. So if you guys are okay with that, we can send it out in our newsletter. And Karina Williams has her hand raised. So Karina, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, thank you. Hi, Peter. It's Karina. Hope you're doing well today.
Karina, yes.
Good. So our community safety that we're doing in our rural area is more informational based. As you know, our land mass is huge, so it's difficult getting partnerships together, but we have found just getting that information out to the residents has been an excellent way to let them know of what's available in the area and in the region, because a lot of them weren't even aware of a lot of the programs that were out there. And our strong partnership with the RCMP, as you're aware, has been very positive for our rural crime watch in this area. So we feel we're making some positive steps forward and hope to continue to do so. And I'm always learning so much when I attend these meetings. So thanks again.
Always a pleasure, Karina, and I look forward to the next time we get together.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us, Karina.
Tara, go ahead.
Hey guys, I apologize. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. I pulled over. I've been listening with enthusiasm because I appreciate everything you guys are saying. I feel like there's lots of communities that are doing this at a community-based level, and I appreciate that there's some formality coming to it, like recognizing that everybody across the province has different sizes, different communities, different resources and access to services. And when I just wanted to ask a particular question, when you're dealing with an ongoing basis, say the repeat same individual that's struggling, obviously committing crimes to survive or live, do you guys have any data associated with assessment outcomes, in the sense that are individuals later on assessed with or diagnosed with FASD or schizophrenia or other things like that? Because and I can't speak for everybody, but that's what I found to be, like, as a previous frontline worker, was the biggest tool to advocate for that person within the system. And I do think that there's not enough assessments being done. That's just my personal opinion, and just wonder if there's any advocacy or stuff going on with that to, like, combat it. You know what I mean? If somebody is only has income support, $765 a month, versus what if they do qualify for AISH, you know, and that $1685 would change their life? And what if they are, you know, what there's, and I can't speak for everybody, but in my experience, when somebody has that proper diagnosis and then the sustainable income, it does reduce the times that I've had to take them to the hospital or met with them to turn themselves in because they didn't meet the probation and there was a warrant out. So I just wanted to talk about assessments because I think it's an important part of the full picture.
Yeah, no, really, really good point. So in our offender management program, we actually get the offenders, one of the things we do, one of the steps we take is getting a consent sign, where they actually allow us to share data and information with all the different services, and then we get around the table. My most dramatic example, to speak to exactly what you're talking about, was a fella in northern Alberta at a beaver lodge. He actually had FASD, didn't do a good job of advocating for himself, didn't, as a result, when he applied for certain funding, didn't articulate some of the challenges that he had. So therefore didn't get that funding that would have been available to him otherwise. But once we got everybody around the table and talking, they were actually able to figure out he did have the diagnosis. They were able to provide the funding. It was really about getting all those partners around the table. So I think it really highlights, like, some of what we're talking about. You know, if they'll actually consent to allowing us to do that sharing, and we have the partners around the table like we do at Data to Action, exactly what you're talking about was addressed, and actually helped stabilize them because you know, we were able to get a steady income support. There was lots of other issues. There was family counseling and so on, but this had been an offender. Like, it was very dramatic. They told the story to the minister actually when he was up there. Our member started it by saying, very honestly, I was, although it was difficult to hear, it was very honest. He's like, I had to be ordered to work with this guy because he's like, I did not think that, you know, this would work. This offender management. We mentored him. We sent our experienced folks up there to work with him. The probation officer said that this guy's never participated in any programs, never like had any positive outcomes. He'd basically been written off. So as we went around the table, they shared that story, but they talked about, at the end of this, the impact was this offender still calls this member on a regular basis to this day. They have a relationship now. The member talked about how the outcome of that process has changed his view of policing and the impact, like, to community safety, because he sees that this guy's now in the straight and narrow, and this was an offender that, you know, basically you couldn't keep out of jail. So it was about bringing those supports in place, and to your point, bridging that gap between some of those things that are issues but aren't coming across, you know, because the person isn't able to advocate effectively for themselves. But by bringing all the services together, they were actually able to bridge some of those gaps.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, and then just really highlighting that. And I'm not speaking for everybody, but those who probably experiencing the most, all the services are obviously complex needs. And I wanted to also point out, several. I'm probably our PDD, persons with developmental disabilities. So logistically don't even have the means to navigate the system. And, you know, and so I've got 15 stories. A gentleman, 45, in and out of incarceration, gets a proper assessment, gets AISH, and he's never been in since. And it took that should have been early 20s. You know what I mean? And so I just appreciate what you guys are doing, and hope that it'll spread to large scale, in the sense that that's what I see as the best outcome of one person at a time.
Thanks for the comment.
Thanks, Tara. Karen, go ahead.
Hi there. My name is Karen Tang. I'm a counselor with the City of Edmonton. Apologies that I only just joined kind of towards the end of your presentation there, but I have a bit of sense of, the, kind of what you were talking about in terms of the upstream social determinants of health. I'm well aware that, with the Edmonton Police Service, there is also a community safety and wellbeing branch not too long ago. And I will be remiss if I didn't, bring up the recent, news around the interaction between RCMP, EPS, and with some of the tragedies that's been happening in our downtown core. And from where many of us are sitting, there is some failure in the systems coordination. And I'm curious about, with kind of the direction of your branch, has there been any reflections internally and with, other law enforcement colleagues around, how to prevent those kind of situations from happening in the future? Does it apply in this case? I think so. And kind of that coordination piece with, the big city, because there is that transition from smaller communities to the big city, and that handover that kind of saw a breakdown. So I'm curious about that coordination piece as well.
Thank you for that question, Karen. Really good question, and the answer is yes. We have had reflections. We've had numerous conversations, both myself and Chief McPhee, very recently. But within our own team here in K Division and the Alberta RCMP as well, we've had some conversations and reflections there too. And that was a very tragic situation that happened. And when we look at this from the broader perspective, we see a couple systems. So we see the justice system, and we know, even within the components of the justice system, there are a lot of challenges in making that work as a system in itself. And then we see the social system as well too, right? So your health, your mental health, education, housing and social services and so on. And that system itself as well too has a lot of work ahead of itself. And what we're trying to do here is bring both those systems together in this community safety and well-being approach, in this, I'll say philosophy, but turning the philosophy into action, to strengthening partnerships, to enhancing community engagement, to providing better coordination amongst the agencies within those systems. And, I would say in the last couple of years that, when I look specifically at policing and the agencies around community safety, that overall we're starting to do a better job. We're starting to be more coordinated. But at the same time, and I think the events recently are again a reflection of the work that is yet to be done, and where we need to continue to go, I would say. And rest assured that work will continue. As you mentioned, EPS has a community safety wellbeing directorate branch. We've created one as well too, and I think others are looking at us. Other policing agencies and communities are looking at these two branches and looking to potentially do the same. But suffice to say, a lot more work to be done. And I think you'll see us in the not too distant future working closer with the Edmonton Police Service, with the Calgary Police Service, right? So our hub communities, our RCMP communities around those metropolitan centers, we've got a lot of great initiatives on the go already, working with them, and a lot of good collaboration. But again, as I said earlier, there's more to come with that. So, we'll continue working in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. No, appreciate your comments. And I think over the years, there's been a lot of focus around systems coordination between law enforcement, healthcare, social services. But I think it's also clear there's some coordination required even within the law enforcement ecosystem, or that system itself as well. So anyways, appreciate the comments.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. So next up, I see Tara has her hand raised.
Me again, thank you. I just, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to touch on the, you spoke about, and ask a question, you spoke about the consent form, in the sense that I think there have been communities that have tried to start it at a more grassroots point, and then finding the barriers between different agencies, HIPAA, FOIP, HIPAA, all the health, all the stuff. So just wondering how you guys were able to create a document for consent, and what parties would all be involved, and is that something you would share in the sense of the context of it? Because that was a barrier to smaller communities starting their own kind of program like that, and totally respecting the individual's privacy. And so you could speak about the consent. I'm totally curious about it.
Sure. That is a pretty complex question, though. We obviously had a lot to navigate in trying to work that out. I will say I worked with, there's a lot of advocacy that happened. I have to really credit Justice Solicitor General in the province of Alberta with helping us with that advocacy as we worked with the different ministries and agencies, and worked through some of the assessments in terms of that consent. But at the end of the day, I guess to try and simplify your question somewhat, it really was about, being specific with the kinds of information we wanted to share with the offender. So it was informed, the offender that we're working with in the context of the offender management program, understanding we were going to be sharing that with the other agencies, and then having to satisfy each of those agencies' requirements that they had in order of what kind of data could they share back with us. So, but suffice it to say, we had agreement, and it's worked well. I think we're in 12 communities right now, working with various agencies. It differs. I think one of the people in that group said, it does have to be kind of tailored to each community. So, each start that we do really depends on what have communities already got established. How do we add to the work, because we don't want to do an either or. There's been a number of communities where when we first come in to talk about offender management, they're concerned because they have some programs they've been running and they feel like maybe we're saying we should be doing this instead. And we're really just saying we'd like to do this with some of the other work that they're doing so we can complement it as opposed to take it over. But then, it's working through with each of those groups at the table. And really with offender management, we've been very methodical, working community by community. Each community is a little different, even from the perspective of, I'll take an urban, I'll call it, like Fort Saskatchewan, Strathcona. A lot of the services are co-located within that community. So service delivery is a little less complex. As you start to move to rural, where we're working in Drayton Valley, and actually where there's a number of services located in different areas that service a number of different communities in and around Drayton Valley, but we've been able to make that regional model work well. And one of the problems or challenges we first had were, detachments were competing for services rather than prioritizing. So we actually got a couple of the districts working together in coordination with the detachment so we could better prioritize that. We got the regional managers involved because there were some differences, I'd say, maybe in service delivery in some of those areas. So we could start making some decisions around who would do that operational frontline work. And then once that was prioritized, actually get the frontline workers out doing the work. But so there's a lot of complexity to navigating that. And it does kind of depend on the area you're working in. The last challenge, which we haven't bridged yet, will be remote. So we have some small remote communities where there's really services are all coming from away, and those will be even more challenging, but that'll be the next step in terms of the model development. I know that doesn't seem like a direct answer to your question, but it is, because it does kind of depend on who you have around the table, and making sure, like I'll use the example in the rural area, we need to get the regional managers at the table, so we weren't dealing with, you know, the frontline operational folks where there might have been a difference between practice and policy and what was being done. We wanted to have people had authority to make some policy level decisions around what the operations staff would do. So I don't know if that kind of makes sense, but it does kind of matter who you have at the table.
No, I think what you're saying is bang on, in the sense that, and I do think coming from maybe an RCMP approach led versus AHS might have been a good, would be a good thing. I agree with the regional approach, in the sense that not every, and respecting again that every size community is different. I'm from Whitecourt, a Newtown councillor and former frontline support worker, so coming at it with a little bit of a different lens, but I do see it that there's resources, not necessarily always within your own community. And then you hit it again with remote. So I consider us rural in this, you know, in driving logistics and stuff inside the community. But just wanted to ask about the consent, because hoping that it'll be shared amongst others, and I like the tailored aspect of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. And now we'll move on to Karina. I see you have your hand up again.
Thank you. My question is for both of you. As far as community impact statements that are read to the judge for the repeat offender, though we do have a few up in our area, but would it be helpful for the IOMI group to have the community impact statement at the table more as a reference? Because I feel you may not be aware of what the community is saying. Would that be a gap that could help with the group? I'm just thinking, especially since you had put out with regards to the remote rural, which, you know, I consider us to be very remote rural. Would this be of assistance, do you think, to the group, just to have the wording that the community has put out there?
I had not considered that, Karina. So, you know, we can definitely have a discussion with some of our groups and ask the question. Maybe if you have an example that you would like to send in for us, we can use that to talk it over. Do you have something, or we could probably pull it out? We might be able to pull it out of the files.
No, I've actually got 5, because I've read 5 in court now, so I can send them all to you.
Yeah, and then we'll have a discussion. But I've never turned my mind to that.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. Karina, we have had some discussions here around, you know, how we can better inform Crown prosecutors and make them more intimate with the needs of communities where they're, you know, representing Alberta justice and doing their work as Crown prosecutors in the court system, and how we as police could assist in, you know, better informing them, and so that they can take that forward to do their job in a more informed way as well too. I think, you know, your suggestion there is probably the same concept, but in a different, a little bit different environment. But we'll continue some of that work as well.
Yeah, I'll certainly send those to you, and you can do as you see fit.
Thanks, Karina. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, it doesn't look like we have any more questions, but I'll talk slowly here. So if anybody has anything else that comes up last minute. And so I wanted to thank Curtis, Peter, and Nina for joining us and sharing this information with us. As we kind of just wrap up here, I want to just share my screen with some upcoming RMA and AB Munis events that will be happening in the next couple of months. So hopefully that's on the screen now. And yeah, thanks again for everyone for joining us, and thank you again to the RCMP, and looking forward to continuing these conversations. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, Warren, and thanks, Kelly, again for your facilitation here, and thanks to everybody that joined in. And if anybody's looking for more information, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd be happy to have a conversation or whatever it takes as we go forward there. So thanks again for your time.